Good morning. My name is Katie Lackey, and I am from Bishop Hartley High School. These are my teammates, Jacqueline Muller, Sarah Weisenberger, and Cassie Wentworth. And this is our professor, Dr. Hansen.
I'm not a professor, I'm Mr. Hansen, but thank you.
Well, for purposes of these proceedings, you'll be a honorary professor. I'm sure I have the right question. And this is Bishop Hartley, and I want to make very sure this is Unit 5.
Yes.
Had a very bad experience once where we had the wrong unit, and they were too intimidated to say anything, and they couldn't answer the prepared question. Okay, my name is, I'll be your presiding member, your chair this morning. My name is Mike Fain. My day job is as a judge of the Court of Appeals in Dayton, and I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves, beginning with Michael Skindle to my left.
Thank you, Judge, and welcome. I am Michael Skindle. I'm a state representative from the Cleveland area and also an attorney. Glad to be here.
My name is Dan Wilson, and I am a lawyer here in Columbus and also a lobbyist.
Okay, thank you. Let's see if I can find yours. There it is. The question that we would like to have your input on this morning is the following one. What are the costs and benefits that freedom of speech and press offer to the individual and to society? Under what circumstances, if any, should government be able to limit those freedoms? Why? And under what circumstances, if any, should an individual's right not to speak be protected, and why?
Imagine Nazi Germany on the night of May 10th, 1933. An event unseen since the Middle Ages occurred as German students gathered in Berlin and other German cities to burn books with un-German ideas. Books by Freud, Einstein, Karl Marx, Jack London, H.G. Wells, and many others were reduced to ash amid the flames as bystanders gave the Nazi salute. As the German poet Heinrich Heine eerily predicted almost a century before, wherever they burn books, they will also, in the end, burn human beings. Today, Americans are protected from such repressions of speech by the First Amendment. Upon hearing the word First Amendment, many Americans think of the right to free speech. But this amendment encompasses much more than merely allowing us to speak what we think. The First Amendment rights protect the entire process of thought and the creation and expression of ideas. When we think, our minds give reason to create ideas. We express those ideas in many different ways. When we talk, when we write, when we believe, and when we assemble. All of these actions and expressions are protected by the First Amendment.
In exchange for such freedom, every American is exposed to opposite, even offensive views contradicting their views and their own values or morals. Such an example occurred when members of the Westboro Baptist Church of Topeka, Kansas, picketed the funerals of American service members killed in Iraq. Members of the church brandished signs displaying messages such as, "Thank God for dead soldiers." Family and friends of the deceased not only found the messages rude and hurtful, but sordid infringement upon their personal grief. Many states have either adopted or are considering legislation that would keep such prosecutors away from mourners. And Congress is also considering a bill that would apply at federal cemeteries.
Although the government has a right to limit the public's right to speech in some cases, such as in the interests of national security, the government is censoring too much of what the people have to say. Today, the government has shown a trend in forcing political correctness upon the nation. Attempts are being made to impose bills or limits on the acceptable language, terms, and viewpoints in public discussion. Politics has become a question of whether or not a certain statement will hurt someone's feelings, something that will only lead to destruction and failure of a nation. The government needs to abandon its crusade to establish our nation as politically correct. It needs to address legitimate cases in which the government can censor speech, such as the case Brandenburg v. Ohio, which found that the U.S. government could restrict free speech only if it was likely to incite imminent lawless action. The government can also limit freedom of speech pertaining to the time, place, and manner of speech, but cannot censor content.
Just as the U.S. Constitution protects a person's right to speak, it also protects the person's right not to speak. The freedom not to speak is an implicit right that holds great relevance for all of us. Freedom not to speak when commanded by church and state, not to sign an oath, not to salute a flag, not to assert belief in God, or not to reveal one's political beliefs and associations. The right to silence is also a legal protection given to people undergoing police interrogation or trial. This right covers a number of issues around the right to refuse to answer questions, whether that to be to avoid self-incrimination or the right not to answer any questions. The right to silence extends from the moment of the suspension of freedom of movement to the end of the trial. The Fifth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution gives individuals the right to refuse to answer any questions or make any statements when to do so and help establish the person is committed a crime or is connected to any criminal activity. At trial, the Fifth Amendment gives the criminal defendant the right. Yes, connected to any criminal activity. Furthermore, when a defendant exercises his or her right not to testify, the jury is not permitted to take that refusal into consideration under deciding.
Thank you very much. At this point, the chair will recognize Mr. Skindle for a follow-up question.
What conditions do you think time, place, and manner restrictions should be met in order to be valid?
Well, there are such restrictions such as the time and the place. For example, you can't yell like obscenities in the street in a neighborhood at 2 a.m. But as we also stated in our presentation with the mourners of the dead soldiers, I also think that should be a time when free speech should be limited, because these men and women go overseas, they fight for us and for our beliefs, even though we may not always agree with what we're fighting for. They're standing up for us as U.S. citizens. And I don't think we have the right to infringe upon their funeral when they're fighting for us and disgrace their name.
Thank you.
This time I'll recognize Mr. Hilson for a follow-up.
I heard discussion about censorship, and I was wondering if you could give us your thoughts on the difference between censorship on the internet when the government censors or when a private entity like Google censors, and Google is the largest search engine in the world. Are the two the same or are they different?
Well, Google is a private institution, so I believe that, if they choose to censor the internet and what is on their search engine, that they can, and it's different from the government because it's access to all people and it's public. So even if Google decides to censor something, people still have another way to access information that maybe Google has censored.
Suppose that is at the request or suggestion of the government.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Would it be the same if Google is limiting access at either the request of or the suggestion of the federal government?
I think it would be just,
Do you mean if the government is telling Google that they need to censor something on their site? Is that what you mean?
Limit access to the site to certain people who, in the opinion of the federal government, are subversive.
I think that if the government asks them to limit what they have on their site, they do have the right, in cases such as for our national security. But if it's just because the government doesn't want the people to hear something on that private site, I don't think they have the right to do that because Google is a private institution.
Let me ask you another question, because the original question not only asked for the benefits of freedom of speech and of the press, but also the costs. What are the societal costs of those freedoms?
well, as we stated in our prepared answer, one of the costs is to be exposed to different ideas of people which can be offensive and challenge your own beliefs. So there is like that open space of disagreement, and that can be one of the costs, and can open also, offensive things and hurtful things.
Well, leading on to what she said, the offensive things you can, like hate crimes come out of freedom of speech, and the thought of like hate crimes, like it can be offensive to other people, even if they just think of something like, let's say like a black person think like they burn a white cross on a white person's like lawn. Like, I mean, they have the freedom in that, but it's really, it leads to the controversial of like, should we prosecute that? Because yeah, they have the freedom of speech to do that. They have the freedom to do that, and like to say something against like a white person or something. But even if it's offensive, it leads to the controversial of the of prosecuting it or not.
Bishop Hartley used the example of banning protest at funerals of soldiers. But don't the protesters have, under our Constitution, a right to express their viewpoints, whether it's regarding the war and also with regard to practices of the military?
They do, but the government has also made it a practice to often not show on television coffins coming back from Iraq with the dead soldiers. And I think if the government has that right, then I think that they should also ban these people at the funerals, because I think it is a personal time for their families to mourn for what their sons and daughters did for our country. Then I finish my thought.
Briefly.
And I think that the government should also ban that.
Okay, thank you very much. Try and have some constructive comments for you, and begin that way.
You did a fine job. The responsiveness was great. There were sometimes too long of a pause in responding to some of the questions. You do need to take time to compose and think of the response to make sure you have a comprehensive response, but sometimes there was too much of a delay.
I agree, there was a rather long pause after my question, but the response was so outstanding that I think it was worth the pause and wait.
And I guess I would offer a mild dissent to that view. I could tell you about one experience in my career where the judge said afterward, "Thane, that was the longest theatrical pause I've ever heard." And the truth is, I had totally lost my train of thought. I didn't know what planet I was on. But it is good sometimes to think carefully before you answer or jump into the baited trap or whatever it might be. I was very impressed, and I'm sorry, I didn't know your names, but this lady on the... Yes. When I asked about the cost, not having remembered that you had addressed that in your opening statement, you gently but firmly reminded me that you had addressed that. That was good, and answer on that. And I thought the example of this church group that goes around to military funerals was a very good contemporaneous example to use to explore troublesome this issue of free speech, and when does my right to free speech begin to run into your right to be defended. I thought that was a great example to use. So I congratulate you and wish your team members well.
Thing. The example was very appropriate. In fact, being a member of the General Assembly, we actually debated that about a year and a half ago. legislation here in the General Assembly on that, so it was very appropriate.
Good morning, everybody.
Hi, we're Bishop Hartley High School. This is my group. I'm Chrissy Day.
I'm Claire Huddy.
I'm Rachel Hecker.
I'm Russ Ramsey.
And this is our lovely teacher, Mr. Hansen.
I don't know how lovely I am.
Wonderful. Welcome, welcome. I'm Dr. Mike Schreffler, and I'll be chairing this session. I'm the curriculum director for Perry Local Schools in Massillon, and I will let my colleagues introduce themselves to you.
I'm State Representative Dan Stewart from the 25th Ohio House District here in Columbus, which is part of Victorian Village, Short North, West Side, South Side, and German Village.
I'm Christine Raphael. I'm the Family Law Program Manager at the Supreme Court of Ohio. I'm also an attorney.
All right, let's get started. Here's your question. In Federalist 37, James Madison argues that energy in government is essential to secure against external and internal dangers and to prompt the salutary beneficial execution of the laws that are part of good government. What do you think are the major external and internal dangers today which government ought to address? What provisions of the U.S. Constitution would enable governments to address those issues? And what are the proper limits to an energetic government?
Take, for example, an atom, the building block of reality. This atom has a nucleus, the powerful center that holds together the electron cloud around it. The atom must retain its perfectly balanced structure so that another atom cannot take an electron away, or the nucleus loses another atom, or an electron. The government holds its citizens together around it, just as the citizens hold the government together. If unknown, unwanted people start to cross the boundary we have created, it will unstabilize the government itself. The most unnerving aspect of that is the force of both places, that both places fear into the government and destroys the people revolving around it. Though the present time's forces oppose balance, the nucleus is held together by a mighty thread resonating ever synchronous in the present times. This is the United States Constitution.
The most reliable protection of our rights, the U.S. Constitution, is single-handedly known as the greatest social and political tool in the United States. With each intended standard and desire of the founders clearly laid out for us, the government is able to fully protect and defend itself, both externally and internally. The 9th and 10th Amendments of the Constitution verify that each citizen has certain enumerated rights that shall not be denied, and that all powers not directly given to the federal government or states are reserved for individual citizens. The 4th Amendment also protects individual rights, as it states that we are secured against unreasonable searches and seizures. The Constitution enables the government to protect national security and settle internal disagreements through the establishment of the National Guard in Article 1, Section 8, calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions.
National security is a double-edged sword, however. While the idea of national security can protect American society from threats such as terrorism, it can give government too much power or energy to exercise unconstitutional laws over the people. For example, with the USA Patriot Act, which was brought into effect to prevent another 9/11, it has done its job, but it has also limited certain rights such as people's privacy. It's also important to note, however, that strict national security policies, like increasing border control, have prevented situations like we have in France currently, where you see Muslim immigrants settling into ghettos and creating separate societies that interfere with the French government, resulting in racial and prejudicial problems. In cases such as this, protecting countries from external problems can create internal problems.
In Federalist 37, Madison talks about this energy in the government and how it's essential to secure against external and internal dangers. And what he's saying is basically you need power.
And if you have more power, then you can do more things to help prevent something bad happening to your country. But the main problem with that is that where do you draw the line? When is too much power a danger to your own country? And like you see with the Bush administration, they're taking stands that aren't necessarily what the country feels is right, but they're doing it anyway. Another example of power being taken too far is Mccarthyism in the 50s and the fear of communism. And communism is going to take over the U.S. and what are we going to do? It's the end of democracy. Rachel brought up the Patriot Act. You also have Protect America. You had FISA in 1978, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. To use Madison's words against himself in terms of energy in the government, he also said, if tyranny and oppression come to this land, can I finish my quote?
Sure, finish your sentence there.
It will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy.
Good, thank you. Okay, we have some questions for you. We'll start at the end there.
How can citizens influence government to take or to refrain from taking action on issues they believe are important?
Well, don't we already do that with like lobbyists and things like that? Like you have certain groups that, I mean, you basically pay people to fight for your opinion. I think another way is activism. If you're not active, how are people going to know that you don't feel that way?
Exactly, and you also have the right to protest. You can protest anything, and you should exercise that right. I mean, you shouldn't just let it go by. Also, people have a chance to elect the officials that they want to see in office. If they want their voices to be heard, if they want to be represented by certain people who hold the same views, then they should vote, and they should participate within their government. And I think that's the best example of how people can make sure that we don't fall into certain situations that they are uncomfortable with.
Can government be too energetic? What evidence can you offer in support of your answer?
Government can definitely be too energetic. Well, I think like the whole idea of energy and like Wes was saying about an atom, like sometimes like when an atom, the electrons move too fast, all the atoms start moving too fast and then it creates heat. And you know, so like you can get burned by your own, I don't know, greatness, I guess. Like if something gets too hot, then it starts burning. So I think like too much power, it sort of can just like shut down the whole system, including like an imperial presidency and stuff like that. And yeah, it's to protect us in like a definite time that we're in now. It's threats of terrorism and things like that. I think too much power, it just, it like backtracks, it like cancels each other out and you start like back at step one.
Well, I sort of think that if, like in the atom analogy, if you have a lot of central power and then a lot of power outside, it kind of evens out to where the country as a whole is more powerful because you distribute the power among the government and the people. So I think that it definitely needs to be shared between the two. And you can't have you can't have a completely free society, anarchy. You can't have a complete dictatorship. You have to have some sort of bridge in between.
And that's why it's important to have not only like federal government, but state governments and local governments. You have all of these layers. You have the branches and everyone's
checks and balances
checking each
within
other.
government too.
Yeah, I agree with Kizzy. I mean, the fact that government's trying to protect the citizens and be energetic about security is kind of also could hurt the citizens because our privacy rights are at stake.
You know, Jefferson thought that if the government got too energetic, that it would be oppressive. And you guys mentioned some places where you thought the government had been too energetic, and I agree with you. How, though, has that become oppressive? Give one or two specific examples where one of those instances became oppressive to the people.
Well, I just want to say, A, Jefferson was a great man, and B, I think an example of the government being too oppressive would be, I don't know, there's so many, just like privacy, though we've kind of beaten that to death.
Yeah, but I mean, like, an example of like an oppressive government to the people, I think when we mentioned Mccarthyism and everything, the people were being directly affected by claims that people would make on them, like times when we were so worried about communists and communism, people were being, like, their reputations, I mean, were completely lost. People were being, I mean, they could lose everything by just someone saying, just slander, like, you're a communist. And the people were being directly affected by that. They were being oppressed in that way, especially.
Another random example of government oppression, I feel like, though it's not addressed too much, is the issue of like the don't ask, don't tell policy in the military, where like you can serve as long as like they don't know you're like homosexual, and it, like you don't talk about it, but you can like have charges brought against you, and I feel like that sort of goes against like all of your like rights to like who you are and like freedom, liberty, you know, things like that. I feel like that's sort of like an oppression where you want to serve your country, but they don't approve of you. I feel like that's sort of not a regular example, but.
Okay, good. We have a couple seconds. Do you have any questions for us?
Didn't really prepare any questions.
That's okay. Okay, well, I'm going to give each member of the panel a chance to make some comments.
On some of the examples, I think that you gave is really well. I have one question.
Oh, sure. We have a
I'd
little
like
bit of time.
a few more examples of how citizens can actively participate in their government as a follow-up to the first question I asked. You gave a few examples, but such as participating in elections and protesting. Are there any other examples that you can think of?
Well, being a part of your community, like being involved in like your local government, like going to town meetings and stuff like that, knowing like who's being elected, making sure you're up to date on, you know, current issues and stuff like that. It's your job as a citizen. You have all these rights, but you need to be informed. Like,
Yeah, I think what we're doing, like right here today, even education is also important. I mean, it's very important to inform people, and the more education, the more emphasis that you put on that, the more people will be informed and the more active they will be. So I think education rights are also a very important way for people to become active.
yeah, I think just every day, like expressing your rights and making sure like you don't just.
Go ahead, you can finish your sentence.
Just making sure like you don't just like say you have them and not use them.
Yes.
Okay, very good. I think we still have time for just a couple of quick comments from the panel up here.
I think you did a good job in using, as one example, McCarthyism as an overreaching of government. You might want to flesh out a few other examples that are maybe current today, wiretapping or other issues that are seemingly in the news even today. But I think you did a great job.
I think you, to follow up, I think you did a great job, and you could tie it together more, the two thoughts together, closer together at the same time, which is the Patriot Act versus FISA. You know, we already have safeguards in place that could be currently used, and maybe the Patriot Act extends out too far. So if you're going to contrast the two, just make sure that the two thoughts. You did a good job contrasting the two, but put them a little bit closer together in time and reference. And some of the other examples you gave were really good. Emphasizing your right to privacy as a follow-up to those. And then you might want to give examples such as the wiretapping as to why the right to privacy has been eroded in certain circumstances.
Also, I think you did a wonderful job. I agree with the comments here. And I'd also like to tell you it's very apparent that you have a good handle on what this question is about. You understand, somebody mentioned double-edged sword. All of these issues are a double-edged sword, and we have to understand, you know, not to get too energetic, but that we have to be energetic, and you seem to have a good idea of that. I was going to say also that it seems in my lifetime there's been a lot more, government has been way too energetic, so there's a lot of things that are going to affect your lifetime. So I would encourage you to think of, again, some modern things that are happening right now besides the Patriot Act that might fall into that category.
One other suggestion I have is, because I know these rooms and I have hearings, I understand the acoustics issue, but make sure that you're dynamic and speak up. It shows, I think, a command of what you already know. So be forceful and speak up, and it'll, I think, show that confidence that you have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Good morning. We're from Bishop Hartley High School. My name is Nicole Howard, and these are my teammates, Olivia Setzer, Darian Davis, and Allie Tren. And this is our teacher, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you for doing this, and that's one of my teachers, Professor Benedict, right there. He was at OSU when I went to get my master's, so thank you.
Well, welcome. Thank you for having us. My name is Robert Vaughn. I'm an attorney here in Columbus with the Supreme Court of Ohio.
I'm Professor Michael Les Benedict, retired from Ohio State University, Department of History.
Monica Dorman. I'm an immigration attorney here in Columbus, Ohio.
Well, you've already introduced yourselves. Can you get your names once again? I'm sorry.
I'm Natalie.
Natalie?
I'm Darian Davis.
Olivia Setzer.
Nicole Howard.
Cool. Okay. Okay. So we will begin. And the question you're waiting for is question number 1. It reads, one of the keenest insights of our founders was that the process by which we arrive at decisions matters a great deal. Legislating is not like war, in which one side strives to impose its will on the other. Good politicians look for solutions that allow both sides to claim, if not victory, at least some gains. Do you agree or disagree with this observation, and why? What process did the founders use for arriving at decisions during the Philadelphia Convention? And finally, what compromises were agreed to that allowed both sides to claim some gains?
Compromise. If not the spice of life, it is the solidity. It is what makes nations great and marriages happy. I believe that our country is like a marriage with our government, that we have a contract that we give our right to the government officials to compromise. They know when to stand firm and to make their opinion, and they also know when to back down and compromise. We have to look at both sides and do what the common good for our nation when we compromise. I mean, it's played a huge role in our past, like the Great Compromise. It was necessary to ratify. Though it was for slavery, we had to do it. And also, I think compromise is very important because our government, like, we have to have internal peace at times, because if we can't agree, our reputation might be bad. So why would other countries want to get involved with us if we can't handle our own issues?
The founders held open discussions during the Philadelphia Convention. This helped so that people could get their opinion out without being afraid of being biased or convicted with hatred or dislike. They also had a policy of privacy. They didn't want people to go out and talk about the convention to other people that weren't in the convention. This helped so that the people would not be biased to other people's opinions of the citizens of the United States. They had this policy so that the members would not have too many opinions from outsiders, so that the convention wouldn't be longer than it had to be, because if it was long, then people would become skeptical of the process and of the Constitution itself.
When it came to compromises to figure this out, they came up with the Great Compromise, also known as the Connecticut Compromise. It was brought about in June of 1787 by Roger Sherman and Oliver Ellsworth. The Great Compromise settled the issue of representation between large states and small states. The two plans that dealt with these was the Virginia Plan and the New Jersey Plan. The Virginia Plan was a plan in which the House of Representatives and big states, they wanted proportional representation, so that meant the more people you had in the state, the more people that you had to represent your state. But the people of the small states, such as New Jersey, didn't like this idea because they felt that the bigger states would dominate the House and they wouldn't be able to get their opinions out there. So they came up with the New Jersey plan, which dealt with equal representation.
Also, they had to deal with issues between the two regions of the North and the South, because the North they objected to the issue of slavery, and they had to create a compromise in order to gain the southern states' trust in the Constitution, because slavery played a very large role in their economy, and they were afraid that if slavery was taken away, that their economy would shut down. And so the northern delegates had to figure out a way to gain their trust. And so they decided that when determining the House of Representatives, may I please have more time?
You can go ahead and finish your point.
Okay. When determining the amount of representation in the House of Representatives to go along with the Great Compromise, they decided that slaves would only count as 3/5 of a person, so that they would get benefits from slavery, but also the North would have an impact on it as well.
Thank you. Round two. As a follow-up question, yes, I said two of you put your notes away. That's probably a good idea. As we abide by the rules here. One question I have as a follow-up. How do you think closing the convention to the public helped compromise?
I think it would compromise because they didn't want people to know what they're doing, because it would have a hard time to ratify it, because of all these different opinions going about would try to influence what we are doing. So closing the convention was a compromise because a lot of people wanted to be public because they wanted their side to win, and there was a lot of political disputes. So closing it was a good thing because we wanted it to be so they could speak their mind and really get out what they wanted to say and not have the worries of the other people, the citizens, trying to influence you.
Yeah, closing the convention in a way kept the process pure, I guess, because then the influences of people's opinions outside of the convention couldn't leak in, and ideas couldn't leak out into the public, so that the delegates that were within the convention wouldn't be afraid of losing power from their people. And yeah.
The idea of closing the convention was probably a brilliant idea. It kept the people from being biased, and the outside environment may have swayed opinions or options that they had used. So this allowed, like Nicole said, it was pure. So their ideas were what they believed and wasn't swayed by the outside public.
I think it protected the representatives because, if word got out that they were maybe opposed to something that where they live is what the majority of the people like, their lives are in danger if, in that time, basically, you could kill someone.
Knock off the competition.
Yeah.
If it's such a great idea that in order to promote compromise, and compromise is so good that we should have secret deliberations, why would you think that might be a good idea now? Close off Congress, let them deliberate in secret, just tell us what they come up with, and we vote, we show whether we like it or not by whether we re-elect them.
I disagree. I don't think we should close it today because our citizens are a lot more involved, and the problem with back then, we really didn't know if we wanted to have a revolution or not. We didn't know if we should have the Constitution. We were debating if it was right, and today, we're deciding major issues that involve our lives right now, so if we close it off, that'd make a lot of angry people. And also, it's already available on the internet and all the press, so we'd probably find out anyways.
Yeah, with the media today, like, it's hard to even fathom the idea of closing off the debates, yes. Like, it would, if we closed it off, it would make everyone paranoid, like, okay, what's going on? Why aren't we hearing about this? And I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think it'd be that possible these days, because even though we don't have as many people involved in our government as we would like, we do have a large amount of people because our country is so much larger. Back then, the majority of the people were white farmers. Some probably didn't even care about what happened in the government. They were just there so that they could get their amount of representation in their states.
There's been some discussion about the compromises made. Why did the framers appoint a special committee to deal with the issue of representation? And do you think that that decision is a good decision for us now?
Well, I think it was a good decision now because all the framers did a really good work because we still use this stuff today. I'm not sure, what do you think?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Why did the framers create a special organization or a special subgroup to deal with the issue of representation? That's the Senate and the House.
Well, they probably created that as a way to like play on people's different talents. I mean, some people that might have been in the Congress might not have been, they might have been more strong-headed people, and so they wouldn't have been open to the idea of compromise, and they probably created that organization in order to, I guess, promote the common good. They knew the compromise is what they needed, but some people wouldn't have been able to deal with that and been able to be open to the other side's needs and wants in the deal.
I think that they did this because it would, like, you couldn't get like Bob off the street to go represent your state. I mean, you have to have some sort of stability to who's running our nation.
Very good. Great job. A couple comments I would make, and then the rest of the panel will share some comments as well. I like how you took the initiative in introducing yourselves at the beginning. However, I would wait till the panel acknowledges you before you stand up. In my legal field, you start talking before the judge acknowledges you, you're going to get dressed down. So, and that could be true in a congressional setting or a legislative setting too. It's always just respectful to wait till the panel acknowledges you before you start to address them. Good job of using the notes as a reference, but not directly reading from them. I really like that. Directly talking to us. Really appreciate that.
Very nice job. Very nice participating, making sure all of you participated. You did that very well. You came out and answered the question very forthrightly. That's, I thought, was very good. You took with the idea that compromise is so important or not, and that was the framework in which you delivered your discussion, which was very good. It was good enough that we pressed you with a rather sophisticated questions about whether you really fully agreed with that by asking, of course, whether you think it would be a great idea now. You don't seem to be as certain about that as you are about the compromise, but you handled that curveball with quite a good deal of poise. Very, very good job, I thought.
I thought there was great participation by all four of you. One thing I would remind you is you don't each need to speak to each question. It can be equal participation if only two of you respond to each question, as long as all four of you are participating in that portion. So I thought you did a great job.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you. Please be seated.
Good morning. We are from Bishop Hartley High School. My name is Rebecca Schlater, and my teammates are Kelsey Schunk, Lisa Schwadbeck, and Denise Lawson, and our teacher is Mr. Hanson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for volunteering today. Thank you. My name is Steve Bruns. I'm an attorney from Preble County, Ohio, and I'll let my colleagues introduce themselves.
My name is Tom Friedman. I'm a domestic relations practitioner here in Columbus, and I'm a board member of the OCLRE.
My name is Jessica Harmon. I'm a mediator and a hearing officer at the Unemployment Compensation Review Commission.
We're going to be asking you initially question number 1, which is, the framers intended an independent judiciary, but also an accountable one, a separate branch of government, but one embedded in a set of institutions that provided important checks and balances. How exactly does the Constitution provide for a judiciary which is at once independent and accountable?
Although the framers of the Constitution did not explicitly draw the blueprint for the judicial branch, the framers' assumptions, the actions of the first Congress in April of 1789, and the actions of the judicial branch since then have shaped this branch of government into an equal and completely separate section. The only portion of the Constitution written for the judicial branch, Article 3, is much shorter than the portions that were written for the executive and legislative branches of the federal government.
Many of the framers who were lawyers that understood a court system in depth were quite satisfied with the functions and structures of the courts in Britain. But the courts in Britain were largely controlled by English Parliament and England's king. Wanting to make the judicial branch as independent as the other two branches, the framers wrote the Constitution in such a way to limit the checks of the legislative and executive branches and assumed the judicial branch would become as strong as the others. The framers made sure the judicial branch would be less affected by political pressures because they do not have to be reelected.
Although the judicial branch has its own separate powers and responsibilities, in the beginning, it was controlled mostly by the executive branch. Supreme Court justices did not even want their jobs because they felt they were insignificant. The first Chief Justice, John Rutledge, rarely made an appearance at work, and the Supreme Court was forced to reside in the basement of the Capitol building. The Supreme Court did virtually nothing until the case of Marbury versus Madison, which occurred at the beginning of Jefferson's first term. John Marshall, a new Chief Justice, wanted to see the judicial branch assume more power and respect. He ruled in favor of Jefferson's administration, but he instituted judicial review.
Marshall only gave Jefferson a tiny slap on the wrist, but this case changed the role of the Supreme Court dramatically. The Supreme Court had literally given itself the power to rule actions unconstitutional. From then on, the judicial branch was truly separate and equal from the other two branches. The framers wrote the Constitution in such a way so that the explicit role of the Supreme Court was left open until someone else defined it.
Today, judicial review is considered the Supreme Court's primary power over the other two branches of federal government. This branch can make laws null and void with the power of judicial review, which originated in the Great Britain Privy Council. The Supreme Court can also decide which cases it wants to take into account. Citizens must file a petition of certiorari in order for the Supreme Court to consider if the case must be heard. 4 out of the 9 justices must believe the issue is important enough in order for the case to be heard. However, the President and Senate maintain the power of appointment and approval of the Supreme Court justices.
Congress also holds impeachment power if a justice does not uphold his political accountability. Another check Congress holds is the ability to establish inferior courts below the Supreme Court. Most justices that serve on the Supreme Court are also lawyers. Justices must follow the code of ethics outlined by the American Bar Association. The Supreme Court must make accountable and responsible decisions so that the public will uphold their ruling. The Supreme Court has much of their power because the public holds them in such high esteem.
The legislative and executive branches can proactively take order in change of American law policy. The President can send troops to write legislation for Congress to review. The House controls budgets as well as passes new laws. The judicial branch, however, does not have the opportunity to be as proactive. They must wait until a citizen or state brings a case concerning a certain issue to them. They do not have to hear every case, but they cannot create a trial in order to pass judgment on an issue. If they want to change a part of American law or practice, they must sit back and be patient until time comes.
The judicial branch has come a long way since the Constitution was drafted, and has thus become one of the driving forces in the protection of this document and what it means. The judicial branch has met and surpassed what the framers intended because of what the founders assumed. May I please finish
your sentence, please.
Has been ensured through the actions of the Supreme Court.
All right, The question that I have is, does the election of judges make them more or less independent? And if you could explain and cite evidence to support your answer.
Do you mean election by whom? Like
Election versus appointment.
Okay.
Does the election, if a judge was elected, does that make them more or less independent?
Well, through, I think it's kind of semantics as well as what actually happens. The Supreme Court is, as I said, appointed by the president. However, we elect the president, and we trust him or her, that they will make the correct decision in appointing Supreme Court justices.
I think like lower judges that are elected by the people then become accountable to the people, which is who they should be accountable to in the first place. So they are truly doing a public service to the citizens of the United States.
How would you explain the power of judicial review? How did the Supreme Court acquire this power?
I guess Marshall looked at the Marbury versus Madison case in 3 steps. He decided that there was no unconstitutional action, but he did pass judgment that Jefferson should have done a number of steps to make sure the correct judges were in position and held their office. So by passing that judgment and making that side note, he kind of deemed and categorized Jefferson's actions as unconstitutional, which then continued on through cases like that.
I'd like to follow up on the question that Jessica asked with regard to the independence of judges. You know, in the federal system, judges especially in bankruptcy court, they are appointed for life or for good behavior. In state courts, at least in the state of Ohio, to a different extent in different states, they are elected. Which system do you think is best and why?
I believe it's better to appoint the judges because that way they don't have to worry about political pressures and being reelected, and the person deciding who is going to be on it, appointing the judges, can make the best decision, and what they're going to decide and not necessarily what their political views are more important than what maybe they've done in the past, like what they will do if they are appointed.
I think if Supreme Court justices were elected, as opposed to being appointed, I think that you would have kind of like a term, like the president has. And I think because they are, in it for life or for good behavior, it gives them a really, really great amount of experience that I think with the number and variety of cases that they hear is essential.
I think election would be better than being appointed because the public gets a sense of like what this person's about, what they're willing to do for you or whatever.
Thank you.
What are precedents, and to what extent do they provide checks and balances to the judiciary?
Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
What are precedents, and to what extent do they provide checks and balances on the judiciary?
The precedents of the other judges, is that what you're referring to?
Well,
like the previous judges that...
let's take an example that you might be familiar with. What was Plessy versus Ferguson, if you know of it? Was it a precedent, and what happened to that case?
In that case, a decision from a Supreme Court was overturned because they decided that something was unconstitutional during...
Knowing now what a precedent is, to what extent do they constitute a check or balance on the court?
I think the Supreme Court has to take into account the president's tradition and what the United States has held valuable and what they've done in the future. So I do think that is an important check that the Supreme Court has to take into account. It's kind of a check on themselves that they have to keep in the back of their minds. No one's, I mean, the public might remind them of stuff that's happened before, but it's ultimately their decision if they want to follow those precedents or not.
I know we're close to time.
Yeah, by the time we asked a question, your time would be up.
I want to thank you ladies for your efforts. You did a nice job. Your answers were on point, and particularly I liked the response to the last question that showed a particular amount of insight. We would discuss Mr. Freeman asking that question before, and I had said, well, that's a pretty sophisticated question, and did a nice job picking up on that. And that was generally the trend. Just one little thing. I always tell my clients when they're testifying in court, if the jury can't hear you testify, it's like you never said anything. And a couple of you were soft at times, and these aging ears had a little difficulty picking it up. So just remember, we're older than you are, so please speak up a little bit. But nice job. Nice job.
I would echo the statements on a little louder. Too much old rock and roll made these ears kind of deaf. You were very good. I think one of your strengths was on your historical knowledge. I think you applied historical precedents better than some of your competitors.
I tend to agree, but I think you have somewhat of a disadvantage depending on what room you're in. We are kind of sitting farther back than we have been for some of the other contestants too, but keep that in mind. Keep everything in mind when you're doing this. And sometimes that's what I said to myself as soon as I walked up here. Obviously, I'm going to have to talk louder than I had in the other rooms because we are farther away. So each time, analyze your situation as it stands for the day because you don't know what room or what type of environment you're going to be in. Try and, like you did, I think you guys kept your timing well, used all your time efficiently, did talk about the history as they said, and that was done very well. So good effort, good practicing, I guess, on that part. And good answers to the questions. I know they were somewhat difficult. You will get difficult questions, and that's fine to take your time, ask to repeat the question, make sure you understand it before you answer it, and you guys did that very well.
I'm sorry, I want to say one last thing. The young lady here on my right, when you said about you like the fact that when judges are elected, they're responsive to the people, that this is an age-old argument, and I find that a lot of people, not just contestants here today, but when I have these discussions with other lawyers and situations, they talk about the merits of appointed judges, and not too many people recognize and remember, hey, we're a democracy, maybe there's some value to electing people, and I appreciated your comment on that, so thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. My name is Dylan Dumpy, and I'm from Bishop Hartley. And starting from my right is my teammate Nikki Vincent, Veronica Hay, Kyle Barr, and Jackie Bauman. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Hauser. I'll be serving as the chair of our panel today. I'm an attorney practicing law here in Columbus. I'll allow my colleagues to introduce themselves, and then I'll read this morning's question.
Good morning. My name is Bob Cupp. I'm a member of the Supreme Court of Ohio and a former member of the Ohio Senate.
Good morning. I'm Chris Bryant, and I teach at the University of Cincinnati College of Law.
The question we have selected this morning is the first question from Unit 4. The Civil War was the contemporary equivalent of a nuclear attack on the nation, so writes a prominent legal scholar. Do you agree or disagree? Why? What were the constitutional issues that led to the Civil War? And why were Americans unable to resolve these issues peacefully?
The Civil War can be compared to the contemporary equivalent of a nuclear attack in that the after effects of both are devastating and long-term. The Civil War's repercussions were felt mainly in the United States. Whereas the nuclear attack today would have a global impact, the Civil War is more geared towards us. These two events can be visualized in geometric terms. Both occurrences are similar triangles with the same aspects and degrees. However, the atomic bomb is a much larger triangle. A nuclear war is defined as destructive in range, coverage, and extent of damage, and has long-term and severe damaging effects that can last years, decades, or even centuries. This holds true to the fact that even after the Civil War, civil unrest was prominent in both the South and some parts of the North. The division between the South and the North threatened to dismantle the small amount of stability that young America had experienced over the past few decades. The war consisted of more than 400 plus battles over a time period of 5 years and a death toll of 646,392 dead soldiers, both Union and Confederate. A large figure to be sure, but even larger loss of life.
While slavery was one of the major issues that led to the Civil War, there were other predominant issues that arose. Sectionalism was an early economic problem among various sections of our country. Disagreements concerning the power of the government and the relationship between the nation and individual states became a constant battle. The North and South had contradicting opinions about tariffs. The North favored the use of tariffs while the South opposed them due to the fact of economic burdens. However, all previous points of connotation might have been solved diplomatically, if not for the issue of slavery. Slavery became the symbol of the sectional rivalries between the North and South.
One of the most important and controversial matters in American history was the Dred Scott discussion of 1857. The case eventually ruled that blacks could not enjoy the rights of natural citizens because blacks were not included during the writing of the Constitution. In addition, the federal government did not have the right to exclude slavery from the territories because slaves were property, not human individuals. And therefore, the government interference would not go against the basic rights, or would go against the basic rights of slave owners and their right to property.
Americans were unable to resolve these issues peacefully because slavery was such a major cog in the cotton industry, and slave owners proclaimed their right to own slaves as property. Furthermore, many believed that it was up to the individual states to decide on whether or not to end slave trading, not the national government. The divisions became fully exposed with the 1860 presidential election. The electorate was split 4 ways. The Southern Democrats endorsed slavery. The Republicans denounced it. The Northern Democrats believed democracy required the people themselves to decide on slavery locally, while the Constitutional Union Party stated the survival of the Union was at stake and everything else should be compromised.
The framers of the Constitution mollified the Southern states by stating that the national government would not interfere with the slave trade earlier than 1808. The framers assumed that slavery would die out by this time because they thought Congress would act in response to the slave issue. With the eventual abolishment of slavery in the northern states and subsequent ruling of the law that made slavery illegal, the point became moot. Slaves were critical to the South's economy. Plantation owners and the like refused to give up their comfortable lifestyles, which led to the cataclysmic event. The Civil
See, your
War.
time is up. If you could finish your sentence for us, please.
The Civil War.
Oh. Does the panel have follow-up questions?
Sure. You made allusion to the Dred Scott decision. Many have said that that was a major cause of the Civil War. Do you agree or disagree? Why or why not?
I do agree with that because when you consider the Civil War as a dispute over slave ownership, they did not consider slaves to be anything besides property. They were not human beings. They had no right to say what they wanted. So the Dred Scott decision, making it the slaves are no longer considered human, made the war a much more, if not easily accepted, maybe accept the fact that while they are property, the war itself is fought for something as simple as maybe land or like ownership over something. It wasn't really a morale sort of issue for the South.
I'd like to have you follow up a little bit on why the South believed that secession was not a violation of the Constitution.
Could you repeat the question?
Yes. Why did the Southern states believe that seceding from the Union was not a violation of the Constitution? Or did they think so? And if so, why or why not?
Well, considering John Locke's theory, which was the basis for our Constitution, which gave a right to life, liberty, and property, since they considered their property to be a threat, they did not consider the secession to be illegal, I say, because if they have a problem with the government and they agree as an unanimous party, then they believe that they have a right to succeed.
What do you think were some of the positive outcomes of the Civil War and why?
I think some of the positive outcomes were that the North and South did compromise, even though it wasn't such a positive compromise for the North. The North had to make a bigger compromise for the South to be happy with the situation, but in the end, they did agree on the slaves being considered the 3/5 vote, and even though it was not a positive compromise to everyone, everyone did end up agreeing on it.
And after the Civil War was the Reconstruction period, which was a real focus and a really great achievement for African Americans, because the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, the 14th Amendment was our equal protections rights, and it granted all citizens, all people born in America, citizenship. And then the 15th Amendment gave all men the right to vote regardless of race. So that was one of our greatest benefits.
And I just want to go along with what Veronica was saying about how, though they had to sacrifice a little bit more, that they did come to terms, and that showed that they were willing to, strive for a togetherness and to become one. And it helped eventually to lead to the 3/5 vote, as she stated.
Do you think that the war could have been avoided if the political leaders, Lincoln or for the North or Jefferson Davis for the South, had behaved differently in the year 1860, 1861 era? Or was it inevitable?
Well, that's no personal, pardon me for this, but I think it's a bit vague, honestly. I mean, you could give anything as possibly everything different if they had responded to slavery, in a different way. Personally, I think it was unavoidable because slavery was such a huge issue for the South and the North, and along with the tariffs that the South hated but the North liked, it was just so many problems that combined as one made the war almost inevitable. However, if maybe, I don't know, if the South had somehow decided to eventually abolish slavery at a certain time, maybe things would have been different, but that's so much conjecture I couldn't possibly cite anything specifically.
I agree with Dylan. As I stated in my information, the South really did rely on slavery to do their plantation work, to do basically everything. So, but the North, I think, learned not to count on blacks to do what they wanted them to do. They learned to work around it, and that's what I think was holding the South back from actually moving forward.
I'm not sure if I agree. I'm glad the Civil War happened, because I'm glad of the Reconstruction era amendments, but I'm not sure if it
if it weren't for Lincoln and those people with higher power, if they hadn't like done something.
Finish your
Finish
sentence.
yeah.
Well, slavery was a huge issue, yeah, but it could have been, today there are a lot of states that have different laws, like for instance, driving, like the age is different in certain states. The southern states could have had slavery as one of their components, and North couldn't just abolished it for themselves, and we could have stayed like that. Would have the slaves rebelled eventually, and that would have been a big controversy in the South. But honestly, I think like Lincoln was a big factor of that. I don't know if it would have actually led to the Civil War if it wasn't for people like him.
Thank you. Any comments from the panel?
Yeah, I want to congratulate you on responding well under fire. We gave you a number of questions, including some wide open ones, and you obviously had to think on your feet, and you did so, and that's a sign that you really have given the issues a lot of thought, and so that was very impressive.
I agree. I think the presentation showed a lot of thought about the material, not just learning the material and memorizing the material, but thinking about it, analyzing it, considering what it means in the big picture. And I think that demonstrates a lot of maturity on your part.
I thought your opening presentation was very well done. It had the amount of depth that would be required, and it was divided among the panel members, so you all had to work on a part of it, and I thought you really did an excellent job, and it came across very well.
Thank you.
Good job, everyone.
Go right ahead. If you want to introduce yourselves first, then we'll introduce ourselves.
My name's Katie Lackey.
My name's Sarah Weisenberger.
My name's Cassie Wentworth.
My name's Jacqueline.
We'll introduce ourselves. My name is Reg Rounson. I'm a common pleas judge from Findlay, Ohio, which is Hancock County.
Good afternoon. My name is Maureen O'Connor, and I am a justice on the Ohio Supreme Court.
Hello, I'm Ed Krause, and I'm a mediator on staff with the Ohio Commission on Dispute Resolution and Conflict Management.
We're here today to discuss one of the questions in Unit 5. Unit 5 reads, what rights does the Bill of Rights protect? And we're going to ask you about question 3. Question 3 reads, evaluate the claim that the jury system brings the common sense of the community to bear on the laws of the state and the nation. How does the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of your state guarantee the right to trial by jury? What is the relationship of the right of trial by jury to the natural rights philosophy and to the principle of limited government? You may proceed.
What is government? Government, by definition, is the apparatus through which a governing body functions and exercises authority. Government can exalt some while it can oppress others. It can be a friend and an enemy. Nevertheless, throughout the world, government has proved to be indispensable to modern societies. Here in the United States, government is not restricted to courtrooms, state houses, or other government buildings. Thanks to the First Amendment, American citizens have the right to express their ideas and thoughts without fear. Thus look around and you will see government. You will see we are government. This definition of government is supported by the role of a jury in a trial. The judgment of guilt or innocence is placed in the hands of the people, not government officials, and serves as a bulwark against arbitrary state rule. Remember when you were little and the games you used to play? How fun would it have been if someone got to make the rules as well as enforce them? You would be at the mercy of the leader and probably not have much fun. However, real life is much bigger than a game and has far greater consequences than being out. Thus, this This not only makes a trial by jury necessary, but also a principle in a legitimate government.
This fundamental right of a legitimate government is protected by the Sixth Amendment. The Sixth Amendment guarantees a person to be tried by an impartial jury of 6 people. The number 6 was chosen because it was believed that it was large enough to promote group deliberation, free from outside attempts at intimidation, and provided a fair possibility for obtaining a representative cross-section of the community. As stated at the Duncan v. Louisiana case, providing the accused with such an assembly of his peers gave him an inestimable safeguard against the corrupt, overzealous prosecutor and against the compliant, biased, or eccentric judge.
The Fifth Amendment's guarantee of due process makes the right to trial by jury applicable only to the actions of the federal government. State courts were not bound to the Sixth Amendment jury guarantee until 1968, when the Supreme Court incorporated it through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment in the Duncan v. Louisiana case. The guarantee of a jury trial in the federal and state constitution reflect a profound judgment about the way in which law should be enforced and justice administered. Due process is the principle that the government must respect all of a person's legal rights when the government deprives a person of life, liberty, or property.
The previous words, life, liberty, and property, have become a staple in the U.S. government and have traveled through the generations from their first appearance in John Locke's natural rights philosophy. He stated that all men have the basic need for life, liberty, and property, all of which are absolute and cannot be changed or challenged. He believed that a legitimate government is founded upon a social contract between the government and the governed. This mutual understanding creates an important balance of power and authority, which is at the heart of a limited government. The placement of such shared powers in the hands of jury members helps maintain this essential and delicate balance. The role of the jury limits the power of the federal and state governments and preserves a person's natural and inalienable rights. By the time the United States Constitution and Bill of Rights were drafted and ratified, the institution of trial by jury was almost universally revered, so revered that its history had been traced back to the Magna Carta. Thus, being well aware of this ancient right, the framers of the Constitution strove to recreate an independent judiciary, but insisted on farther protection against capricious rule with the addition of trial by jury. Chief Justice John Jay had said, "It is presumed that juries are the best judges of facts. It is, on the other hand, presumed that courts are the best judges of law. But still, both objects are within your power of decision. You have a right to take it upon yourselves to be the judge of both and to determine the law as well as a fact in controversy." The jury system is just... can I finish my sentence?
Yes.
The jury system is one of the ways American citizens participate and play an active role in our government.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
I'd like to ask you a question about having a panel, a jury of your peers. Do you feel that juveniles should be tried by jury? Why or why not? I'm sorry, and what I meant by that is the jury being juveniles. Please proceed.
Oh, I don't think they should, because I think that they need older people that have like seen different things and have maybe not experienced them, but like have seen different views of it, be the jury rather than people of that age, because they haven't seen as much as the older people and they haven't like seen the different ways of going about like seeing if there should be like accused of the crime or not.
Okay, thank you.
I would like to know your perception of the role of the jury as opposed to the role of the judge in a trial. What is the distinction there?
I think that the jury is more common citizens. They can relate to the person who is on trial. Unlike the judge, who is kind of a part of our government, the citizens play an active part, but I think they can relate more and they have shared experiences.
All right, but the distinction between the two different roles in a trial, obviously the judge is an elected official here in the state of Ohio and is charged with responsibilities. The jury, supposedly a jury of peers. What are their duties in a trial?
The jury plays a bigger role in to have like the, if it's guilty or not of the crime, because they, as a group, they decide like the majority, but each individual of the jury has its own opinion, and they say guilty or not guilty. And so I think they play a bigger part more than the judge necessarily.
I would say that the judge is more like an overseer of everything, and guarantees that the person being tried has a fair trial, and that like all the legal proceedings that go into a court case, while the jury kind of it gets together like a cross section of the community of the person's peers, and from that it's kind of they determine the outcome of like the verdict, like because they do decide if the person being tried is guilty or innocent.
Every Monday, I have about 4 or 5 jury trials scheduled. Most of them don't go. Then every Friday before Monday, my office is deluged with telephone calls from people who've been called to jury duty, none of which yet has called to thank me for their opportunity, but to ask if they can be excused. I listened to what you had to say, and you paint a picture of jury service as an important component of the democratic process. So why is it that people, at least in my county, don't perceive it the same as you all perceive it?
I think that a lot of people see it as they have to take time out of their day and, postpone their lives, to judge another person. But I think that when you really look at it in depth, it's really an honor to be able to, go to court and hear someone's case, and to be able to, look at the facts and say if, a fellow citizen is guilty or innocent. So I see it as an honor.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Just to go along with that, a lot of times in our society it's kind of like, well, if it's not really affecting me, then it's really not my issue or problem, or I don't have to deal with it. So along with Katie said is that, they're going to be judging a person that they don't even know, and that their lives don't even cross really, but so maybe they just don't feel as if it's worthwhile to them.
What governs a jury in the execution of their role? The individuals who are jurors, what tells them how they must proceed to view the case? Do you know? How do they know what to do in a trial? Are they just left to their own devices about whether or not they think a person is guilty or innocent, or do they derive some information that helps them do their job?
I think that they all talk to one another, and they present their different viewpoints, and you see different sides of how people view something, and it has to be a consensus at the end if it's guilty or innocent.
Yes, I think that the jury, when they come to their decision, it's mostly based off their own life experiences, I guess, and their own view of the case. So, and then with the group of jury members, they can come and kind of share ideas, share different opinions, and then reach a consensus.
What is an advantage to a defendant to have a cross-section of the community on the jury, that is, representatives of many groups, and you get time for a one-sentence answer, please.
I think it's a big advantage to have somebody who relates to you or is part of your community, and even gender sometimes. For example, if a woman was raped and her rapist is on trial, and on the jury is women. I think that they will be able to relate to her situation more so, and I think being able to share emotional experiences is really to your advantage.
Thank you.
Any thoughts from the panel?
Just a technical note, and that is, once you are well prepared and you are looking at notes, it is very likely that you will start speeding up in your reading. Be aware of that. It gets real easy to read it real fast, and we may not be able to listen as fast as you're speaking, so be aware of that tendency. Fine presentations. Thank you very much.
I agree that you need to, you know the information you're relaying to us. So tell us like you know it, not like you are just wanting to get through, giving up as much information. I think it's important to talk in conversational tone, and that helps, because it's abundantly clear that you are well prepared and you know what you're talking about. With addressing the role of a jury and what governs a jury to how they do things, they're limited. You seem to have the impression that juries can sit there and listen to the facts and draw on their own personal opinions and come up with a guilty or not guilty verdict. But actually, it's quite the contrary. A judge instructs the jury on what the law is. And even if the jury does not like the law, even if the jury does not agree with the law, they take an oath to be bound by the law and have to figure out what the facts are, who they believe and who they don't believe from the testimony, and then apply that law to the facts to come up with the guilty or not guilty. And we're obviously talking in the context of a criminal case. So the jury it's an awesome responsibility, as you all recognize, but it's not an unlimited, a blank check, so to speak, to do whatever they want with the case. It's very restricted, and the law has to be applied, and that's for continuity, so that ensures somebody has a fair trial because they know the jury adopted the law and applied it to the case. And that's one of the most challenging things that a jury does, because as you intuitively recognized in your responses, juries are humans, and they have their own life's experiences, and they like to, that has a certain effect, but they are duty bound to put those feelings aside and just follow the law as the judge tells them what the law is.
I think, actually, I thought I heard a quote from John Jay, which incorporates the very response you were looking for, Justice O'Connor, that juries best know the facts and the judges best know the law. I think that's the principle that's involved. I think you're also well prepared. I'm surprised you even need those notes, and I wonder if you really do. I mean, you know this material backwards and forwards. My guess is you could do it without the notes, but I will say this, you didn't use them as a crutch. Everyone looked up, which is important. The eye contact, looking us directly in the eye. And when we threw you a couple of those curveball questions, I think everyone did their best, took a second to reflect, which is also a good idea. I don't think it's a good idea just to reflexively say something. I think it's a very good idea to just think for a second and then respond, because then it's probably a more informed response. And I think you did a very good job of responding to all of our questions, and it's clear to me that you know this material. And if you'd like, I'll have someone come up and I'll have you record that, so when the jurors call me on this afternoon when I get back to my office, I can play to them what they need to hear, and that is they need to understand how lucky we are and how really important they are. And it is an honor to be accepted, in my view, and to be selected to judge somebody else, to make, in some cases, recommendations of life and death, and in some cases to render civil verdicts in cases that can be huge sums of money and vindicate rights of people. I can't think anything that's more important in the country in terms of the democratic process, to be right there in the middle of it. But I'm sure I'll have about 15 phone messages when I get back.
I do want to co-sign the judge's comments. I love the term that it's an honor to serve. That really struck me.
I think what I could add to that discussion in perspective, within the last, just this fall, I had the opportunity to interact with a number of judges for the Ukraine. And the Ukraine, since its liberation, I should say, it's a separate country of the Ukraine, they've implemented a jury on the books. They have a law that they can have jury trials in the Ukraine. It's never been implemented and put into effect because the Ukrainian people do not trust their neighbors to do exactly what I said, set aside their personal prejudices, their personal likes and dislikes, and follow the rule of law. So the citizens don't want jury trials because they don't trust that their citizens, their fellow citizens, and maybe they don't trust it in themselves, they recognize that in themselves as well, because they have not had a history of the jury system. And we're very fortunate in this country, unlike many, many other countries, that we have a history of the jury system that is, I think, unique and very beneficial to the rights of the citizens of Ohio and the country.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Great job.
Good afternoon.
We're Bishop Hartley, and my name is Chrissy Day, and these are my teammates.
I'm Claire Huddy. Hi, I'm Rachel Hecker.
Wes Ramsey.
And this is our teacher, Mr. Hansen.
Thank you for volunteering to judge today.
No problem. It's our pleasure. Okay, thank you for the introduction. My name is Mark Fowler. I'm an Assistant Attorney General in the Ohio Attorney General's office. And I will let my colleagues introduce themselves to you now.
I am Brandy Seskis. I'm the legal counsel for the Senate Democratic Caucus.
And I am Cliff Hyde, a member of the Ohio House of Representatives, and I work here.
Okay, I'm sure you guys are dying to know which question you've chosen.
Can we do it? We were joking. We were going to say, which one do you want, and then tell you, no, that's not it.
Like you guys don't have enough pressure, right? Okay. No, actually, don't feel any pressure. Just relax and do your best. I'm sure you guys are going to be great. We have chosen question number 3. It is, how have the natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism influenced Americans' beliefs about the rights and responsibilities of citizenship? How would you define the common good, and how do you think it should be determined? And how would you respond to those who claim Americans have inherited too much of the self-interest of the natural rights philosophy and not enough of the public spirit of classical republicanism?
Okay, to start off this question, I'm going to tell a quick story. When Forrest Mars Sr. Was traveling in Spain during the Spanish Civil War, he encountered that the soldiers there ate these like little chocolate bits that were covered in like hard shell candy. And like a good American, upon his return to the U.S., he took a good idea and he found a way to sell it. And he marketed it as M&Ms, and you know them as they melt in your mouth, not in your hand. And the combination of chocolate, which everyone loves, and hard candy, which is a little bit more traditional, was the perfect candy, and it was introduced at the perfect time. Just like another good combination enjoyed by Americans, which is natural rights philosophy and classical republicanism. Together, they form a very sweet sort of government, one that allows individuals to protect their own rights by supporting their country. Who knew self-interest could promote the common good? Well, the founding fathers did. And their compromise between old and new became what we have now, a constitutional federal republic. Compromise, like Mr. Mars and the founders discovered, was all about meeting in the middle. To quote President Eisenhower, "People talk about the middle of the road as though it were unacceptable. Things are not all black and white. There have to be compromises. The middle of the road is all of the usable surface. The extremes, the right and the left, are in the gutters."
And like Eisenhower said, because there is so much gray area and things vary so much, it's difficult to define the common good because it's subject to change. I think there are those universal rights such as life, liberty, and property that are constant and must always be protected. However, many can argue that the common good does not exist due to the fact that it is up to such vast interpretation by so many people. For example, during World War II, Hitler exterminated thousands of Jews, people whom he believed were detrimental to the German society, for the common good of his country. Yet, how can ending life protect life? What may be good for citizens of one society may not be good or even seen as correct by members of others. The common good is up to much interpretation and can be defined based on anyone's personal opinion. Therein lies the flaw. There is nothing common about people's personal ideas.
The natural rights of life, liberty, and property, and the Roman view of classical republicanism have also influenced the U.S. in many different ways. Since both philosophies were commonly practiced and encouraged during the time the founders created the United States Constitution, Americans today are forced to live by the same standards when the Constitution lies as the base of our society and governing methods. As the amendments were shaped around the importance of a citizen's life, liberty, and property, those standards will remain the same and continue to influence Americans as long as we abide by the laws of the Constitution. Whereas the concept of classical republicanism invokes peer pressure. People do what is socially acceptable, and the Constitution's references to the common good have shaped the way we act and what we believe to be right and wrong. Yet there will always be the people that don't follow the rules and social standards of society. So the question is, how does society deal with the imperfections within the system for the benefit of most and the common good?
It is a natural instinct for people to better themselves and advance the position of society. In these times, citizens have grown to be more independent and have more self-responsibility and work for themselves instead of having more for the republic. But ideas are so powerful of the individual that the ideas, if one believes in it so much, that it will spread into the vast majority of culture. Through the spirit of classical republicanism, it is lost to the individual, but it is gained in the... May I please finish?
Yes, go ahead.
It is gained in the entirety of the nation. And once the individual vessels are melted together into the body of the country has food for their thought.
Okay, thank you. How would you distinguish between self-interest and enlightened self-interest?
I think self-interest is entirely selfish, to only benefit ourselves, and enlightened self-interest would be promoting the good of others in a way that we can also benefit.
I agree with Claire. Just to elaborate a little bit, I mean, self-interest, everybody has their self-interest at heart, whereas enlightened self-interest is doing something that is good for yourself, but it also benefits others. For example, charity. People would give money to certain, charitable associations. It's debatable, but they do it because they feel good, as well as they're helping another cause. And
You might get a tax write-off.
Yeah, that's what enlightened self-interest really is. It's doing something that might be self-motivated, but you are doing it to better the society also.
I was kind of thinking, the self-interest of Mother Teresa or saints and people who do good for the whole of society and the whole of the world, do it because they themselves want it and they're enlightened in themselves. But originally they didn't do it because they were trying to maybe change the world. They were just doing it because it made them feel good. So self-interest may just be a precursor to enlightened self-interest. It's just a kind of a path that you have to take.
Do you think that every citizen should be required to perform some kind of national service? Why or why not?
Oh, I think every citizen should be required to. I'm an Army brat, so I understand the importance of being involved in your government, and or even in a little way. I think, jury duty or any type of activism, just even something as small as going to your community meetings. I live in a small town, but I know a lot of people who still go to town meetings to see what's going on. I think if you're called upon by your government to do something for them, you don't forget sort of your patriotism. I think it reinstalls the traditional values that Americans have that sort of we become numb to after a while. We can have freedom of speech, freedom of religion, but I think if you're actively using those, you don't forget them as easily. And you also, just like the government owes you, you owe your government.
I disagree with Plessy, actually. I think that requiring people to perform a public service actually cuts down on patriotism. If you have to require it, then I don't think there's anything patriotic about that. I think that you should go and, go to city, town meetings and vote and be involved in your government, but I don't think that it should be required, because then it's more like a chore. It's not something that you would want to do. It's not something your heart will be in, I don't think.
Well, I don't think if you're using those rights, then I don't think you should have them. I don't know. Just look at military service. the draft and stuff like that, like that's a perfect example of being required to like do something for your country, and who's gonna say like, no, I won't fight. I don't.
Well, there
I
are
don't
many
understand.
people who
Well,
say
I know they did, but I mean, it's just doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think there are times when if you disagree with what the government is doing, you shouldn't be forced to have to be involved.
Exactly.
I agree with Rachel.
I think you should have the choice to say yes or no. That's what America's all about. I don't think you should be forced. I think you should want to, but I don't think that you should be forced to.
But being a citizen it denotes participation, like just because you're a citizen. Like you have to pay taxes, that's mandatory, it always has been. Death and taxes, that's the only thing sure in life. But like you can't make it so absolute that you have to do this, you have to do this, or you'll start to get into a form of government that you're required to. I mean, it's like a communist society. I mean, you cannot have that sort of rigid structure, but you can. I think the way it is now with like the draft, taxes, jury duty. I mean, things that you're asked to do now. I think they've kind of had they've drawn the line in a good place.
Well, let me take you one different angle. What responsibilities, if any, do you think the nation's schools have to promote and protect natural rights for the common good?
Well, education is, I mean, that is the first place that people will, in their lives, encounter morals and common good, and what's good for somebody else may not be good for you, or vice versa. And I mean, even in this setting, I mean, we are learning about the basis of government through our education, and through that, we're learning life lessons that you couldn't learn anywhere else.
And as Claire said earlier, talking about classical republicanism and different virtues and morals that were passed down through society. I mean, also, it's a weird way to look at it, but peer pressure. I mean, we act a certain way because we're supposed to act a certain way, and I think schools and environments, they definitely instruct that.
Did you get a chance to finish? Okay.
You guys did a great job. Well done. Some comments that I have is you guys had awesome participation. You all jumped in on every question. You didn't shy away from anything. I like the fact that you guys got into it a little bit. That was, that's what this is all about, debating ideas and having the right to say what you think is right. So, good job.
Thanks. Yeah, I will echo that. You did an excellent job with participation and with addressing the questions that we asked. And I like that you weren't afraid to disagree with each other. So.
I taught government and history for 30 years. I was thinking about Mr. Hansen the whole time you were doing that, thinking, I'll bet he has a whole lot of fun with this group. I think I may, but this is good. I loved the M&M story. I taught an analogy, so you hit me right on. It was good. When you blurted in the tax write-off, I thought that was cute. I thought that was nice. I liked your comment on how does society deal with imperfection, and they've been trying to figure that out with me since I've been around. But it was a very good point. I liked your use, you talked about the distortion of the common good, and I thought that was a very good point, and you had many others. And when you talked about educational diversity, obviously that's I just thought that was good. I thought you had some good responses, and I was impressed. And the funny thing, I just need to tell you, I've done this before. I actually was an assistant coach of a We the People team years ago when I taught. And I always, and these two are new, and I told them, it's really fun if they disagree sometimes. Never have I seen it like this. So, and I think that's to your advantage, I hope. So it went over well with us anyway, so thank you. Good job.
Please be seated.
Good afternoon, judges. We are from Bishop Hartley High School, and my Megan Stewart. These are my teammates, Matt Locker, Ashley D'Agostino, and Brooke Callahan. This is our teacher, Mr. Hansen.
Thank you for volunteering to judge today. Thank you for being here. And we'll just go around and introduce ourselves. My name is Jesse Cantrell. I'm an Assistant Attorney General, and I work for the Ohio Attorney General's office.
I'm Jane Stark. I teach middle school at Jackson Middle School down in Grove City, and our entire 8th grade participates in We the People.
I'm Marion Smithberger, and I'm the Executive Director for the Columbus Bar Foundation, and I'm on the board of the Ohio Center for Law-Related Education.
Let's get right to it. Your question is number 2, which is, how and why did the Magna Carta contribute to the development of constitutional government? What important principles of modern constitutionalism are contained in the Magna Carta? And what ideas in your state constitution and the U.S. Constitution can you trace back to the Magna Carta?
Here is the law, which is above the king and which even he must not break. This reaffirmation of a supreme law and its expression in a general charter is the great work of the Magna Carta, and this alone justifies the respect in which men have held. This is a quote from Winston Churchill. Before the founders began writing the first of the American charters in 1776, they looked for a historical document stating their rights and what they wanted to base their government on. They also wanted a reason for separating from England. The Magna Carta resulted from King John's disastrous foreign policy and overzealous financial administration, so he demanded a fee from barons and eventually was forced to sign the Magna Carta. This is where we got our idea for the Constitution. The Magna Carta limits the royal powers of the king and defines the obligations between the king and the barons. The Magna Carta also allows people to participate in their government actively. The influential clauses in the Magna Carta that are significant in our Constitution are the freedom of the church, the great council of the realm to prevent unfair taxation, controlling behavior of officials, and mercantile and trading regulations.
The ruler must agree to rule along with certain guidelines according to a rule of law. The certain basic rights may not be denied by the government because the governed cannot be violated. The Magna Carta led up to the creating of the Bill of Rights and established basic rights of Englishmen. Government should be based upon an agreement or contract between the ruler and the people to be ruled. If either side of the two that make the agreement violate it, it is void, and it helped lead America into political independence. But he who really loves freedom and his fatherland will never forget that the signet of the tyrant sealed alike our civil liberty and our national independence. And that's a quote from Richard J. Rowland.
Rights that cannot be violated by government are inalienable rights. Clause 13 of the Magna Carta describes inalienable rights that cannot be violated, and ancient liberties and free customs must be respected. The United Nations Asian meeting in support of the inalienable rights of the Palestinian people occurred in December of 2006. It attempted to protect the Palestinian inalienable rights that were being violated. It attempted to stop Israel from killing and using excessive force of power. It also attempted for international peace and security and to lower the violence and terrorism in the community. The inalienable rights include the natural rights of life, liberty, and property. In Palestine, life was being unjustly taken away. Property was being destroyed, and freedom was not free because people did not feel safe and secure in their communities.
The Magna Carta limited the power of the king, and likewise, the Constitution limits the power of government officials. Another great example of the Magna Carta that is shown in our Constitution is in the Bill of Rights, especially under the Fifth Amendment, which states, "No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law." Due process of law is limiting the power of a ruler. The Fifth Amendment comes from the 39th clause. May I finish my thought, please?
Let me finish your sentence.
Found in the Magna Carta that states no free man shall be taken and imprisoned, outbanished, or outlawed, banished, or in any way destroyed.
You just have been talking about the due process of law. Can you think of any instances today where the government, some people say that the government has abused its power?
I think our government has abused its power of law through some things that have been happening lately, like wiretapping and things. I don't think that our government has the right to do that because of certain things that have happened in the past. I think everyone deserves personal privacy, and that's one thing that government's not doing right now.
Although Brooke makes a good point that the government shouldn't be wiretapping into people's personal privacy, I think that there is an instance where the government should be allowed to do that. For instance, the terrorists that have been that we have discovered living in random apartments around town, we should be allowed to wiretap because that's in the interest of national security.
Now, the Magna Carta laid out certain basic, what you call inalienable rights. Are there any others that you might add to the list rights that you consider to be basic?
Well, there's always the natural rights philosophy rights, life, liberty, and property. Those are always the basic ones. Can you guys think of any other ones?
I think education is one thing that everyone deserves, along with life, liberty, and property. Everyone deserves to learn and just have, learn. I think everyone deserves education, and that should be a right that everyone has, no matter what.
I feel like speech should be another right that everyone should have. There's always about content and time and place, but not counting those, speech should be something that everyone deserves to have.
Other than the Magna Carta, can you point to any other documents that were used as a basis for our Constitution?
Definitely. Thomas Jefferson actually quoted directly from two other documents, a summary view of the British Rights of America. It's a document stating all the rights that the Englishmen had and that the Americans felt like they should have. Another one was the Virginia Declaration of Rights by George Mason. That one was very significant. Obviously, it was all the rights that the Virginians believed they should have. And Thomas Jefferson borrowed directly from them and put it in the Constitution.
Can you tell us a little bit about why Magna Carta was needed? What prompted the Magna Carta to be created, historically?
Well, the Magna Carta was created from King John's violation of the colonists' rights. I'm not sure I understand the question.
That's okay. Can you, that's probably my fault. Can you just tell us the history that led to the creation of the Magna Carta? Or the circumstances that demanded it?
King John was after a war, and he was taxing for, all the money that they spent, and it was taxation without representation, and the Englishmen didn't think that was right, and they had him sign it, which, I think it's a good thing that the Magna Carta came about, because if that war, and all the problems they had wouldn't have happened, then to think that our Constitution might not be as strong, our Bill of Rights might not be as strong because the Magna Carta didn't come around is.
The Magna Carta was made to help protect the rights of the people, and because they needed protection from other people violating their rights. And like sections 2 to 5, they talk about the right to own property and own land. And I just think that was the reason Magna Carta was made, was to protect them from being violated.
That's it for us. You guys can relax.
You guys did a very nice job. It's very apparent that you are prepared, and I'm sure you put in a lot of work to get here. I liked how you answered questions directly, and I'm glad that you asked me to clarify my question, because I don't see anything wrong with that. I've done a lot, even in court. I argue in courts as an attorney, and in a lot of appellate courts I'm kind of grilled like you guys are, and often it's helpful if you don't know what the person who's asking you the question is asking. Nothing wrong with clarifying, so I'm glad you did that.
The other thing that I thought that you did a nice job with is that you allowed yourselves to disagree with each other a little bit and nuance your answers, and that's in this kind of a situation, that's a healthy thing to do, and I thought you did it well and professionally and respectfully.
And also, you all participated in the question and answer part. The first 4 minutes are easy to get that prepared speech, but it takes a little more to be able to answer one of the questions that we kind of loft out there. So congratulations on doing that. Good job.
Thanks. Nice job.
Maybe sit.
Good afternoon. We're from Bishop Hartley High School. My name is Nicole Howard. These are my teammates, Olivia Stetzer, Darian Davis, and Natalie Trent. And this is our teacher, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you for volunteering to do this today. Thank you. My name is Bob Priest. I am a middle school teacher at Van Wert Middle School and formerly a high school We the People teacher. And so I certainly understand what you're feeling. I know the nerves and all the good stuff that's going on right now.
My name is Heather Mann. I'm a policy advisor to Speaker Houston across the street in the House of Representatives.
My name is Rob Mullen, and I'm an aide to Congressman Ralph Regula up in Canton in the Ohio 16th Congressional District.
This afternoon, we have selected question number 3. The Virginia Declaration of Rights has been hailed as the cornerstone of the constitutional system because it contained many constitutional firsts. Identify the constitutional first, or basic principles, in this document and explain their significance. In what ways did the Virginia Declaration influence the United States Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution? What rights that we enjoy today under both our state and federal Bill of Rights were included in the Virginia Declaration? You may begin.
Kay Granger, a congresswoman from the 12th District of Texas, once said, "Human rights are not a privilege granted by the few. They are a liberty to all. The human rights, by definition, include the rights of all humans, those in the dawn of life, the dusk of life, or the shadow of life." George Mason said that all power should be derived and kept by the people, and that the government's main purpose is to protect the people. Some of these protections include, and if these rights the people don't agree with, they have an opportunity to abolish them or change them. And some of these rights include trial by jury, protection against armed forces, self-discrimination, cruel and unusual punishment, freedom of press, freedom exercise of religious beliefs. These rights are the foundation of our nation today.
Thomas Jefferson, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, and James Madison, who wrote the U.S. Constitution, basically reworded and changed George Mason's Virginia Declaration of Rights. They wrote these by using many phrases and many ideas from his Virginia Declaration of Rights. Some of these ideas were that all men are created equal and all men should have certain unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the property. and that the idea that government should be run by the people of the government, and not the government should be run by the people, not by certain few people.
As we stated before, the Virginia Declaration of Rights was written by George Mason, and its main purpose, it depicted that the government's main purpose is to protect the citizens' rights, including the natural rights, from John Locke's philosophy. And also, it sort of checks the government, and it says that it cannot take rights away from citizens based on heritage and cannot hold prejudices against its citizens. And that would kind of apply to Nazi Germany. Like, according to the Virginia Declaration of Rights, Adolf Hitler could not do what he did and extinguish Jews and other members of his society just because of certain aspects of their life. And George Mason said, "In all our associations, in all our agreements, let us never lose sight of this fundamental maxim, that all power was originally lodged in and consequently is derived from the people."
There are many rights that are under both the federal and state Bill of Rights that were stated in the Virginia Declaration. One of those was no taxation without representation. So, like, with the Magna Carta, you couldn't just tax a bunch of people without telling why or have representation. There's trial by jury, which plays a really important role in today's society. Protection against forced incrimination and no more cruel and unusual punishment, which also applies to today's world, though Guantanamo Bay is also a question about that being used. Freedom of press and religion, because we don't want like an established religion in our society, so I think that's really important because I like to believe what I want to believe and no one's enforcing their beliefs on me. And freedom of press, so we can find truth, and it really makes people aware. So we can't have the government constantly hiding stuff from us all the time. So we are a little more aware about that. And back to the trial by jury, that's a really significant role, I think.
You can finish your statement.
Because trial by jury, that ensures us that we can have a fair trial and stuff like that. So, thank you.
Thank you. At this time, if you have any notes, please put them away. And I'll allow my colleagues to start with follow-up questions.
Were there any important rights, in your opinion, that were omitted from the Virginia Declaration and later in the Bill of Rights?
The rights that all men are created equal. Slaves weren't considered people, they were considered slaves. They weren't human. They were considered property instead of a human being.
Do these rights come from God or from the people themselves?
I think they come from the people. I mean, again, we have this thing about state and church being separated, but also we are brought up with a religion, so it does play a effect because the people are the government. If we have religious influence, we're always going to sway that way. So I do think religion does have some effect on it.
You mentioned a few different times all men are created equal, that phrase. And you've already addressed the issue of slavery and the fact that not really considered men but property. Understand that. Well, why then the property qualifications? If all men are created equal, even the white males, why the differences in property qualifications for privileges of voting?
I don't understand what you're asking.
Okay. Saying that all men are created equal, and we know that white men, when they use men, we're talking about white males. Why did they differentiate and say that in order to vote, you had to have property qualifications? Is that falling under the quote-unquote all men are created equal phrase?
It doesn't follow it, but they thought that, you had to be sophisticated and educated to be involved in the government, and if you had property that implied that you had some idea of basically what you were doing.
At that time, I think it was more of they didn't really want them to have the right to vote, so they made all these little things like poll taxes and grandfather clauses to prevent that happening, and was later abolished with the slaughterhouse cases.
Well, in the time when they were using the property with the white males, they were just breaking away from a society where they didn't get the opportunity to participate in their government. And so they were, in a way, they were making it almost like they were making it more of a privilege than they already saw it as, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to put it. I guess everything else to say, I got it.
Are there any, in a modern context, are there any rights that were contained in the Declaration and today that you think are being abused in today's society?
Well, I think a lot of rights are being abused in today's society. I mean, the most favorite one was freedom of speech, which everyone loves, but it is being taken advantage of by us using slander and offense with it.
Yeah, I mean, I could agree with Natalie. People don't realize that there are manner restrictions and time and place. You can't just go say whatever you want whenever you want. So a lot of people think that they can go do something when they can't, so they figure that they can, but that's not always the case.
Can you give me an example, please?
Like a shopping mall is sometimes a debatable one because it is a public but private place, because it's a public place in which people can go in and they can't be kicked out for color or race, but yet you do have these different private businesses that are located within it. You can't go wearing t-shirts sometimes. Maybe if you go down the main aisle of the shopping mall, you can have a shirt that says something negative or racist, but if you go into a certain store, they might have a code or violation against it.
Another example would probably be private schools, which we go to. I mean, we can't go around swearing or using profanity and having offensive material on our shirts and stuff. So that's another restriction that's on our right to speak.
Now, the distinction you're making there, let me clarify in my mind. When we're talking about rights, we're talking about what a state actor can do to you on those rights. And a state actor being the government, not a mall, which is a private owner, or a private school. So could you add some clarification about that? Because essentially, and you can correct me if my interpretation is incorrect, these rights involve what a state government can't do to infringe on those rights, or a state actor.
Television's all regulated by the government, and they can censor certain things that can be shown and what can't be shown.
Also, the government has been concealing some images that might, can I finish my thought, please?
Please.
That might affect us, coffins of the dead soldiers coming from Iraq. That was concealed from us. The censorship. So.
Thank you. Comment?
I think you guys did a very good job responding to some tough questions. A lot of these are more theoretical, I think, in nature than some of the more factual-based questions you might get in some other sessions. So I guess my only comment would be, I think maybe just a pause before you answer a question and think about how you want to organize it before jumping right in. Be my comment.
Thank you.
You did a nice job of presenting the principles and the Declaration rules as you understood them, and I thought it was clear that you knew those. In the question period, be careful about the examples you use because, again, we're talking about what a government can do to you, not what a private actor can. And a private actor would be like a mall or a private school. So again, these rights are there because they're there to protect individuals from government activity. So make sure I'm sure you understand that. Just make sure you make that clear when you're talking about it.
I thought you did a very nice job of using a great sense of historical and yet contemporary examples. I mean, we jumped from Guantanamo Bay back to the time prior to the Constitution, and you guys were, I thought, had a great way of being able to tie in both historical and contemporary examples. And so that's tough to do. I mean, that's very tough to do. If you were to go home and talk to your parents, my guess is that conversation would not take place. So that you're to be commended for that. I think that's a great job and a job well done today. Congratulations.
Hello, we are from Bishop Hartley. My name is Rebecca Schlater. These are my teammates, Kelsey Shaw, Lisa Schlagheck, and Denise Lawson, and this is our teacher, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you for volunteering. I'd just like to thank Officer Vaughn. He's been to our school a couple times to judge our school conference. Thank you. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. I'll introduce myself and I'll ask my fellow judges to introduce themselves. My name is Corey Schall. I'm a mental health court program manager for the Supreme Court of Ohio.
My name is Rod Barnes. I'm with the City of Dublin, the Division of Police.
My name is Ann Fisher. I'm a columnist for the Columbus Dispatch, and you know where that's at.
You'll know the format of what we're going to follow here. You're going to have 4 minutes to use your prepared text to speak, to respond to the question we're going to ask. Then our timekeeper is going to give a 1-minute warning, and then we'll give you 6 minutes of some questioning, back and forth, give and take, and we'll go from there. I want to thank you for participating. The question we have this time from the unit is question number 2 for you. Why have the battle over gun control and the meaning of the Second Amendment become perennial features of American life? Please evaluate, compare and contrast the positions of those who claim the amendment guarantees a collective right versus those who claim the amendment guarantees an individual right. Please begin.
The battle over gun control in the United States has been waged continuously since our country's founding because Americans have had the advantage of free speech, thought, and speech, and thus are free to take opposing views on how America remains secure. Of course, most citizens want to feel secure and safe in their own country and in their own neighborhood. The question on how to achieve absolute safety begins the debate. Some Americans feel more secure with the gun at hand or in their nightstand in order to protect themselves. Others feel secure knowing that the good guys are in control, thus desiring the National Guard and the police force to possess guns. The latter group claims that our society would be at a greater advantage if individual civilians did not possess firearms.
The debate is understandable. Everyone is unique and believes in different means of obtaining their safety. Those who want firearms to be a collective right of the people base their belief on the 18th century use of armories in each town. The town's arsenal provided a place to store the city's artillery until the town was attacked. Using the idea that the militia, today's National Guard, owns the armories, supporters of the collective right believe that the first Congress wrote the Second Amendment, referring to the firearms owned by the militia. The militia of each city had the right to firearms rather than the citizens of each city. The recent shooting at the Westroads Mall on December 5, 2007, evokes concern about a concentration of firearms. A man killed 8 people. If everyone had had guns, what would it become?
Other Americans see the Second Amendment as a right given to each individual. They point out that in the 18th century, most men had guns. Fathers had to protect their families, and hunting was a way of providing food. These people believe the framers realized that owning a gun was a man's way of providing protection. Guns ensured a person's right to life. The framers understood that life was one of the most important things to protect along with liberty and property. Making the right to firearms an individual's right would allow each man to protect his life as well as his liberty and property if those were ever threatened.
Fresh off of the Revolution, the framers were wary of an overbearing government. The English monarchy had stomped on the colonists' rights, though the framers were very aware of the fact that at some point the citizens may have to overpower the government. In this case, the citizens would need to arm themselves in order to fight. Those rights of citizens included in the Bill of Rights is an individual right. They believe the first Congress intended everything included the Bill of Rights pertains to the individuals, then a collaborative group of people.
In order to comprehend these views completely, one must look at what causes most people to take a stance in this debate. Political leaders involved in this debate who are also running for the presidential election in 2008 include Rudy Giuliani and Hillary Clinton, both of whom have held important positions in the state of New York. Rudy Giuliani, the former mayor of New York City, is Republican, while Hillary Clinton, one of New York's U.S. senators, is Democrat.
Because of the high crime activity in New York City, both of these politicians want more gun control laws. They encounter more crime involving guns than many other politicians from lesser populated areas. Mike Huckabee, another presidential candidate and governor of Arkansas, has continuously voted against gun laws. People who live in high populated cities face more violence than those who live in rural, farming communities such as those from Arkansas.
Former Mayor Giuliani insists that gun control is appropriate for the city, but that states and cities should be allowed to make gun control decisions locally. Because of the difference in environment for city dwellers and country folk, the federal government cannot agree on the Second Amendment.
The federal government faces this continuing debate because it concerns one of our most fundamental rights, the right to life. Also, there exists a different perception of security. Do citizens want to bear their own arms in order to protect themselves, or would a citizen like to have the national security guarding them in all cases violent?
We're done time there. Questions from the judges? No? Okay. That's way. Questions?
The Second Amendment refers to the militia. Tell me how the militia, that word, and how we relate to it has changed over time, and how that's affected the debate.
Okay. The militia has kind of evolved into the National Guard, and some would argue that it is their duty, and only their duty, to protect us, and they, the National Guard and obviously the police force, should have the right to bear arms. Although another point of view is, okay, if they have guns, that's very important, but it's also the civilians' right to bear arms for their own security.
How might and how should the meaning of the Second Amendment be clarified, if at all?
I think it's incredibly difficult to clarify this because it's not as explicit or drawn out as the other amendments in the Bill of Rights. I think the government and the public of the United States needs to concentrate on the framers' intentions, which unfortunately weren't included or written on the Bill of Rights. And they also, that is important, but also I think most importantly, they need to consider what is most important to us today in our society. What do we value, and what has society done recently to affect this situation?
Right, and I also think that it's important to look at this amendment. It's an individual right for a collective purpose. We all have the right to bear arms, but what is it for? No, it's not to just go out in the street and shoot whoever you would like. It's for the protection of not only yourself, but for the whole of society.
I think you also have to look at, while the founders' intentions were very vague, there are certain tendencies. All the other rights in the Bill of Rights are individual rights, so that would lead one to think that it's an individual right. But you also have to look at, again, how the times have changed, and at the time, everyone had a gun, so it very well may have been an individual right. But today, definitions of security and ways to be secure have changed, so you have to take that into account.
But I still think that it's important for an individual to have the right to carry a gun if he or she wishes.
You mentioned not only the ability of an individual to protect themselves, but the ability of the community to protect itself. The Anti-Federalists strongly supported the right of the citizens to bear arms. Who were they concerned about protecting themselves from?
I believe that they were concerned about protecting themselves from a stronger central government. They were weary from England's king and their parliament overpowering the citizens, and they wanted to be sure that if this government turned out to be like England's, or it kind of strayed away from the values that we held at the beginning with right to life, liberty, and property, then they wanted the people to be able to take a stance against the government and not be overrun by them.
Get a little bit more detailed about that collective right versus individual right. How has that evolved over time in terms of the right to bear arms? Be a little bit more specific.
I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that.
When the amendment was written, someone mentioned that the weapons were kept together in an armory, and yet you said that it was written as an individual right too. How did the individual become also a collective? Was it the same thing? Has it changed? Are they different than what they were then? The individual and the collective.
Well, this is where just by the way that you are kind of, you're both not really sure what each other are thinking. It's hard because the way in which the amendment was written, nothing is for sure about it. However, I think that back then it was more of a, in the case of the armory and such, it was more of a collective right because it was for the good of the society. They would have had guns in their own homes if they were worried about protecting themselves from themselves. And I think that today it's a little bit of both. I think especially if you live in certain parts of town, if you live in certain cities, you're going to have to take into consideration who you are living with and who are you living around, but also with the terrorism scare, you also have to take into consideration how am I going to protect myself.
Thank you very much. We're going to give you some feedback.
Nice teamwork, ladies. I thought you gave sufficient detail, and your opening statement was particularly detailed and was on point, had a lot of relevant facts. I think you're very responsive and focused on, answering the questions that we brought up. Of course, we have a limited amount of time here and a broad topic, but I thought you did very well. And always remember, you can never have too much supporting evidence, in this kind of competition, and I wish you luck.
Thanks for questioning me back. I think that's the smartest thing you can do if you don't understand what I mean, then make me clarify myself. That's what we were asking you to do. So good turnaround, good job, and good effort together.
Well, you did well. Your timing was perfect in your presentation, and I was impressed that you just didn't divide up and try to divide your time and just go 1, 2, 3, 4. You went ahead and you varied it up a little bit, and you went back and forth in terms of your answers, and you started strong, you went through, and you finished strong, so I think you did an excellent job there, and I think that definitely in the ability to, ask us questions, in terms of when it was unclear, that's the appropriate thing to do to get clarity in such a situation. And I think that you just did an excellent job all in providing us with feedback to the questions that we had asked you. So, excellent job. So, good.
Good afternoon. I'm Pierce Reed. I'm an attorney for Justice Maureen O'Connor at the Ohio Supreme Court. I'm going to have my co-panelists introduce themselves to you, and then I'd like you to introduce yourselves to us.
I'm Rhonda Zatazla. I am a consultant at the Ohio Department of Education. My office, the Office of Educator Preparation, we regulate basically the colleges and universities who prepare teachers here in Ohio.
My name is Steve Sianka. I'm Assistant Director for Continuing Legal Education at the Ohio State Bar Association, which is an organization, a membership-driven organization of the lawyers of Ohio. And what I do there is organize seminars for lawyers to attend to keep up their credentials as attorneys.
Well, good afternoon. We are Bishop Hartley, and my name is Dylan Dunphy. And starting from my left,
I'm Jackie Bauman.
I'm Kyle Barr.
I'm Veronica Hay.
Nikki Vincent.
And that is our teacher, Mr. Hanson.
Good afternoon. We're going to begin. I'm going to read the question, and you can start when I finish. The question that we've selected for you is question number 2. How and why has the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment proved to be one of the most effective tools for social and legal change in the United States? And in your answer, please address, has the 14th Amendment enhanced the importance of the Bill of Rights, and if so, in what ways? And what responsibilities of citizens, if any, are implied by the right to equal protection under the law? You may begin.
The Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment states that no state shall deny any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of laws. This can be interpreted as meaning no one can be given special privileges over another because of sex, race, sex, color, ethnicity, or education. It also prohibits any state from making or enforcing any law that abridges the privileges or immunities of citizens. The simple language of the 14th Amendment has induced endless controversies over its interpretation. Beginning with the slaughterhouse cases, the Supreme Court ruled the 14th Amendment case with only the most minimal and restrictive rights needed to decide each case. The Supreme Court, however, has never found or declared that the 14th Amendment protects all rights recognized by the Constitution. This has led to the doctrine or the selective incorporation of the Bill of Rights.
The Equal Protection Clause was a response to the Black Codes that arose after the Civil Rights Act of 1866. The Black Codes were used to put restrictions on how former slaves could act out their lives. These codes also limited the freedom these slaves could have in their lives. This entailed that it would take more work for them to attain property and brutal punishment for even the smallest offenses. The Equal Protection Clause has come up in many cases, including Brown versus Board of Education, Bush versus Gore, Plessy versus Ferguson, and the slaughterhouse cases, just to name a few. This clause has also helped citizens who have been born or naturalized in the United States to be full-fledged citizens. This attribute makes everyone equal, at least in the eyes of the law. This meant that the Dred Scott decision was overturned, which states that slaves were property, not citizens. This clause made them equal to everyone else.
Our country has made immense advancements in helping with racial and gender discrimination. The presidential candidates that we are running today are a prime example of this advancement. This exemplifies that our country is not only ready to have an African American president, but we are also open to the reality of having a female president. A government that gives us as much say in who is in it as our deserves our support. Our government includes us in almost everything. And in today's world where our way of life is being attacked on many fronts, we should believe in the government and the way it operates.
The 14th Amendment made the Bill of Rights apply to all of the states, which prohibited the states from violating a person's right to life, liberty, and property. This has increased the importance of the Bill of Rights. The power of the federal government, as well as that of every individual state government, has now been limited. Because we have equality under the law, we have the right and obligation to vote. If you are given the right, its importance should not be minimized. As a citizen, you should exercise your right to vote in a responsible manner. If the law looks at individuals equally, we should evaluate every candidate on an equal playing field.
Thomas Jefferson rather poorly stated what the Equal Protection Clause means. We are not all created equal in the sense that we all have the exact same amount of money, land ownership, and the privileges that we have today. There are things such as class, race, sexuality that inhibit how we take our basic privileges such as freedom of speech and the right to vote and apply them. Having more money Can I please finish?
You may finish your sentence.
Having more money allows for a greater influence in society based on our capitalistic economy. And as such, freedom of equality is not exactly what we think it is.
Thank you. Please put away any notes you have. We'll be asking you some follow-up questions.
Okay. What are the differences between equal protection and equality of opportunity, if any?
Could you please restate that?
Sure. What are the differences between equal protection and equality of opportunity, if there are any differences?
I'd say there's a difference, and when you compare equal protection to equality, equal protection applies to having the basic fundamental rights, that you're not allowed to take those rights away, inalienable rights. Equal protection helps conserve the fundamental similarities between everybody. However, equality differentiates because it is applied to how people take certain factors they have, say money, and apply them.
I don't think money is an issue in opportunity. Someone could come from a low budget, poverty level house, but if they apply themselves and work hard to become the best person they can be through just their experiences or through the education they can receive, they can receive any opportunity possible through scholarships. And colleges will see that and they will realize that they can do anything if they apply themselves.
I want to use our teacher, Mr. Hansen's father, as an example. His father started off real low budget farmer, but through perseverance and hard work, he worked his way up and made himself so that he could, his father ended up bettering himself and his family. And as you can tell, Mr. Hansen has come a very far way from his father's, and he went through college and he gave he's now giving his kids a chance at bettering themselves, which it's just going to keep on getting better and better.
Well, if you put it that way, then, I mean, sure, everybody has basic fundamental rights that they can apply and take it however they want, but yes, getting the money does help a great deal for starting out. I mean, it's a great thing that his father built his way up from a simple chicken farmer, but as he did that, he gained more money, and then that allowed Mr. Hansen himself to grow financially, and then his kids benefit from that. So saying that money itself isn't everything you need. You need you need a determined will to do something that applies yourself, but you do benefit from having a substantial amount of money.
I agree to a certain point with Dylan. I believe that money does have a certain role in how far you can go. But my example is my grandpa got drafted into the Army during World War II. And after he got out, he used his GI Bill to go back to school. Many of his colleagues did not, and I think that's a very good example because a lot of the GIs got their schooling through the GI Bill after World War II, and they did help make themselves better by going to school and getting their education and getting the ability to earn the money to make themselves better.
I agree with Dylan and Veronica. I think you should have a little money because my mom coming from a different country, her whole family came here and most of them went to college here because got their high school education there. So, but their parents were wealthy there, so they had a little bit of money coming here to do what they needed to do and to get it done, and the determination also played a role in it.
Thank you.
Can you talk a little bit about the relationship between the Equal Protection Clause and the principle of limited government?
I'm not quite sure what you mean. Can you please, elaborate?
Well, talk to us just a little bit about, okay, the Equal Protection Clause in the 14th Amendment and the principle of limited government is the foundation of the Constitution.
The limited government.
How are they related to each other?
The limited government put a limit on how much power the reigning officer had and how much power he could use throughout their government. It allowed the country not to be totally overruled, but it also did put a lot of limits on how the government officials could rule.
Thank you. Congratulations.
One more down.
This is a little bit like a congressional hearing. We've been doing this question this afternoon, and we realize it's a difficult one, or a difficult set of questions. So one of the things I thought that you did very well, I like that all 5 of you jumped in on the first question. I like that you referenced Mr. Hansen and his family. I don't know how Mr. Hansen feels about that, but good way to get an A in the class, regardless of what happens. But I like that you agreed to disagree, and each one of you stated something different. You build on one another, but you voiced your independent thought in a very respectful way, which is one of the things that the whole idea of government and what we're trying to do here, it reinforces that idea. So I really like that. It's okay that the second question, that you didn't have a quick and ready answer to it. I thought you were thinking about it and wanted you to jump in a little bit more, but we're running out of time, so don't worry so much about that. These are difficult questions, probably even more difficult than the habeas corpus questions. So I thought you did a very good job with it. I know it's nerve-wracking, but don't let that detract from the strength of your first answer. You did a very good job.
I think you're all to be commended for going through this program. If nothing else, if you don't go on to Washington, you go back to your back home with a better understanding of how our government works, the beauty of our Constitution, and that will make you a more informed and more effective citizen than the average person. So you can congratulate yourself on that. And that will serve you well as you go on in life and participate in our nation's life, voting, running for office, perhaps, or working somewhere in the public sector. So even whether you win or not this competition, you've won in this personal sense that you've prepared something, you've faced a rather difficult task, and you went through it. And you can go home and feel proud that you stuck with something and got something out of it. So congratulations even for that.
And I'll reiterate that. I made a note that the agree to disagree thing was very, very positive. Something that just drives me insane is the public discourse. People who think that arguing and fighting is the way to behave in public, and so this kind of being able to talk in a civil manner, I think is wonderful. It gives me hope for the next generation. But that second question was hard. It was a really hard question. We've asked it of everybody. And it does take some time to sit there and think about. And we ran out of time because you did such a thorough job on the very first question and built off of each other's answers. So everybody that we've asked the question of has sat there and looked like, oh my gosh. And then they've had to then get into the question and start building on each other's answers. But you didn't have time to do that. So we know that, we realize that. So don't let that throw you, okay? So we do want to throw that out there to you. But it is a hard question, and we know that. But
And every group asks, could you restate the question, please?
which is a wonderful technique to do.
I'm going to use it when I get back to the office.
But thank you so very much for all your hard work that you put into this. This is something that means a lot to us in our professions, and so we're so happy that you put the time into your preparations and hope that this is a lifelong passion for you as well. So thank you.
Thank you.